You ever seen the movie Idiocracy? It's got a pretty simple premise to it. It's this idea that society sort of devolves because of a simple mechanism. And I think personally that school has that kind of mechanism built into it. Dr. Gabor Maté, the world-renowned trauma expert and one of the most cited voices in developmental psychology alive today, says that every child has two non-negotiable needs to survive, and that's attachment and authenticity. That's the freedom to be connected to the people that they love, and the freedom to be connected to themselves, to their own gut, to their own compass, to their own feelings. Both of them, according to Gabor Maté, are non-negotiable. And if you take either of those two things away, you deal real damage to the child. So here's the question that I want to sit with today. What does traditional schooling do to those two things? Because I've been looking at this for a really long time. And I think that we need to have the courage to say some things out loud that I think a lot of people are dancing around. I believe school is destroying both of those things. And unfortunately, the damage doesn't just stay in the classroom. It's damage that we carry throughout our lives. Some of it's visible, some of it's invisible. But I think we need to get real about this. Now here's the thing, I want to get this out in the open right out of the gates. I don't want you to think that what I'm saying about Gabor Maté is something that he's directing at schools. He's not. At least not directly. I'm not putting words into his mouth, but I do think there's implications to what he's saying. And I think there's implications to what a lot of different people out there are saying. I just don't think people like Gabor Maté, as far as to the best of my knowledge, are willing at this point in time to actually direct this stuff directly at schools and say what I think probably needs to be said. But you've got Gabor Maté talking about attachment and authenticity. You've got Gordon Neufeld, one of the world's leading psychologists, writing a book about how we need to be really careful, especially because of schools, that our kids don't become peer-oriented, meaning that they get their direction, their sense of meaning, and their purpose and their values and all that kind of stuff from their peers. You got William Stixrud and Ned Johnson in The Self-Driven Child talking about how the internal locus of control inside of a child, their ability to control their life and have a sense that their actions actually directly impact their life, have been taken away from kids, largely because of school. And you've got Jessica Lahey in The Gift of Failure talking about how kids who are overmanaged have a hard time handling difficulty. And of course, there's countless others, but there's John Taylor Gatto, who was the New York Teacher of the Year, quitting his job publicly and saying that he was no longer willing to hurt children. Different thinkers, different decades, different disciplines in some cases. And yet a lot of them are saying the same types of things. And when you take all these bits of information, you take these different paradigms, you can easily see that government schools, this place where kids go for the majority of their day and they spend hours and hours taking orders and taking commands, are the primary culprit. So I think the answer to the question is, yeah, government schools are making kids dumber, but not just intellectually dumber. I think emotionally, spiritually, I think there's a hollowing out that's going on there. We have to lose your authenticity. You lose your primary connections. You lose your internal locus of control. And you know the interesting thing about it? It was designed to do all of that stuff anyway. That was the purpose. But let's start with the intellectual one. John Taylor Gatto, he wrote a book called Dumbing Us Down. And to him, this was not an exaggeration at all. His argument is this: schools are not designed to produce curious, self-directed learners at all. It's designed to create manageable, compliant workers who will sit still, do menial tasks over and over again, and not ask questions. He talks about the 7 lessons that school actually produces: confusion, class position, indifference, emotional dependency, intellectual dependency, provisional self-esteem, and the sense that you can't hide. Intellectual dependency is this idea that the teacher has the answers, that knowledge comes from outside of you. It's given to you rather than from inside of you as you pursue it and you seek it and you earn it and you gain it. And then we wonder why kids lose their love of learning that they're born with. The research on intrinsic motivation is unambiguous on this. External rewards and external pressure don't just fail to motivate, they actually destroy intrinsic motivation. When you replace a child's natural curiosity with grades, tests, and a constant message that someone else is evaluating your performance, you don't get a more motivated learner. You get one that's got more anxiety, that's more compliant, a more externally dependent one. And we see a rise of anxiety as a result of this in the study that Ned Johnson and William Stixrud talk about that went on from 1960 to 2002, and it showed an exponential growth in anxiety in children as their internal locus of control is taken away from them. It's not a coincidence. That's what happens when you spend 12 years of your life being told that someone else gets to control all these aspects of your life. And on the emotional and psychological damage, Gabor Maté describes the tragedy at the heart of childhood in a way that I think a lot of parents have never really heard. Every child has two survival needs. One is attachment to the primary caregiver, and they also need authenticity, which is the connection with themselves. And here's the thing that he points out that I find fascinating. When those two needs conflict with each other, when they come up against each other, the child's always going to choose attachment over authenticity. They're going to sacrifice their authenticity for the thing that's their most primary survival need, which is getting fed and having shelter, and right. And what he points out is that when a child has to give up their authenticity, they learn that their real self, their real needs, their real desires, their real wants, the things that really make them are no good. They're undesirable. And that in order to have their most base needs of life and their survival met, they have to sacrifice who they are so that those needs can be met. Let me sacrifice who I am so they can be happy. So then they'll be willing to give me the things that I need, which is attachment. Now here's the part that I've never heard Gabor Maté do. And maybe he has somewhere and I've never seen it. But as somebody who has deconstructed, if you will, the whole government school paradigm, and I'm not afraid to call it what it is, and I'm not afraid to say what I think about it and all that kind of stuff. And I had my experience as a child. And when I heard Gabor Maté saying these things, I went, oh my gosh, I think that resonates with me on a level I never really understood before. Again, this is not Gabor Maté's words, and I don't want you to confuse that. I want you to just stop and use your brain for just a second and think about this. Think about a child in a classroom with 29 other students, with one adult whose primary job is order and compliance. They're going to learn pretty quickly that their authentic self is an inconvenience in that setting. The kid who asks too many questions, he's going to get managed. The kid who struggles to sit still is going to get labeled and probably going to get drugged. And the kid who somehow gets really passionate about something that's not in the curriculum is probably going to get redirected. So they do what every child does, what Maté says they do, and they sacrifice their authenticity for attachment, for acceptance. Except now the attachment isn't maybe with the parent, it's with their peer group or with the teacher. It's the grade on the report card at the end of the semester. So you have a child now at this point who's learned that when they express that they don't want to go to school, the parents say, too bad, you got to do this. We require you do it. Then when you're in a classroom, whatever your natural tendencies are, they're not good enough. You have to learn how to comply. You spend more time with your peers than you do with your folks. And so you end up with this friction on both your authenticity needs and your attachment needs. Gordon Neufeld warns about this attachment to your peers. He calls it peer orientation. When that attachment to the adult in their life, their primary attachment fades and gets disrupted, they become attached to other kids who are just as lost as themselves without that attachment. And they can't get what they need from that. And so you have a generation of young people who are desperately attached to the opinions of others and completely disconnected from their inner compass and from their family values. Maté even says that this kind of suppression of your authentic self and your attachment needs and all that kind of stuff goes even deeper. It's not just psychological, it's emotional, and it goes down into your nervous system. It literally affects your body on a physiological level. and it can lead to illness. So we're talking about anxious kids. We're talking about unhealthy kids and kids who, as they become adults, they carry this baggage with them throughout their lives. And without the proper treatment, without the proper direction, they don't know how to undo this baggage. And they become parents who parent to the best of their ability, but with all of that trauma and all that baggage. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit interesting for me. And this is the original Daniel Moss contribution to the psychology canon. Okay, so this is my own original take. This is what I think I'm looking at out here. You ever seen the movie Idiocracy? It's got a pretty simple premise to it. It's this idea that society sort of devolves into utter idiocy because of a simple mechanism. The responsible, healthy adults end up not really procreating because they're being responsible and they want to make sure their finances are aligned and blah, 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 whatever. But the irresponsible, unhealthy adults procreate like crazy. And so you end up having them be parents who then take their craziness, their wildness, and pass that down to their kids. But it just gets worse and worse. And so this is how society in this movie ends up becoming this ridiculous joke of a world. Obviously, this movie's for laughs, but there is some air of truth to it. There are such thing as self-reinforcing loops, and there is such thing as generational trauma that gets passed down. And I think personally that school has that kind of mechanism built into it. And what I mean, if it's not clear already at this point, is that school has this mechanism that does suppress authenticity. It destroys intrinsic motivation. It creates an external locus of control. It accelerates peer orientation. And so it has the ability to produce anxious, compliant, emotionally stunted young people who don't really know themselves. Those kids grow up, and what happens? Some of them become parents, and they parent from that place. And they can struggle to be present for their kids. And they can assume that peer orientation is normal. And they can feel really good about their parenting when they parent in an authoritarian way and completely remove the internal locus of control from their child, protecting them from everything, saving them from everything, not wanting their kid to feel the kind of trauma and letdown and all that stuff that they felt growing up. And some of them even become teachers and administrators and curriculum designers and school board members, and they build and they maintain the system that reflects their own inner world. I know you might be laughing right now. I understand, especially if you're one of the great defenders of that system. But Gatto, who doesn't lay it out the way I just laid it out, he calls this dumbing us down. I'm not trying to lay out a conspiracy. I'm not saying that there's people out there right now who are thinking, oh, how can we lay out this master plan? I'm just talking about a mechanism that I think is real, that I think compounds over time. And the question is, what breaks the loop? I was part of this system that told me I was dumb. It graded me an F, a failure. I was bullied. I came out of that system just like war-torn. I struggled with self-doubt. I struggled with my understanding of how I fit into this world. I had no direction. I had no sense of creativity, no sense of purpose, no sense of my place in the world. I needed people to tell me what to do. And I spent decades like that. And I was parenting from that place. I was a husband from that place, homeschooled from that place. I duplicated my experience because it was the only thing I knew. And it took something that broke that loop. And that thing was somebody handing me a book and showing me that there's another way to look at things. And what was magical about that book was not just that it showed me that there's a different way to look at education, one that made sense to me, where my authentic self finally started to come alive because I went, whoa, wait a second. I wasn't crazy for thinking that the system wasn't for me when I was a child. I wasn't crazy for struggling so bad to comply with this freaking thing. There is another way to do it. But not only that, the book showed me that I can become something, that I wasn't stuck how I was labeled in school. When it labeled me a failure, I wasn't stuck like that, that I can become something. So it lit a fire in me. And I wanted to become something for my kids and for my wife and for myself. And I wanted to learn about me, and I wanted to grow, and I wanted to see my kids grow. And as I started to read things like these books that I was mentioning to you, I started to realize there's a whole body of knowledge out there that points toward homeschooling your kids and putting that locus of control back into your kids' life, allowing them to experience the world in a meaningful way so that they can learn things about their authentic self, but doing so in a way where the attachment to their primary caregiver is solid. And homeschooling facilitates that. And that's why I created a school group for fathers who homeschool their kids. And this could be the dad who stays home, or it could be the dad who works, but nonetheless, your kids are homeschooled. And you want to figure out the best way to be impactful for your kids and inspire your kids. And you need community, and you need brotherhood, and you need support, and you need education and reprogramming and unlearning certain things and patterns. The school group link is in the description, and I'd love to have you come join me. It's free. And I'd love to hear your experiences. I shared some of mine, and I'd love to hear what your experience was with school and homeschooling and where you're at with some of this stuff. So leave the comment in the description. You have a wonderful day.